Welcome back. You know, in debates like last night's, there's nothing harder to keep track of or judge for yourself at home than discussions about taxes and fiscal policy. So to help clear through some of the clutter, we're joined now by David Callahan. He's the co-founder of Demos and editor of PolicyShop.net. He's the author of many books on politics and national security, and has written extensively, lucky for us, on taxes and fiscal policy. David, thanks very much. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Let's start with something that we heard from Governor Romney last night about lowering tax rates. Let's play the clip and then I want to get your take on it.
I'm not looking to cut taxes for wealthy people. I am looking to cut taxes for middle-income people. And why do I want to bring rates down and at the same time lower exemptions and deductions, particularly for people at the high end? Because if you bring rates down, it makes it easier for small business to keep more of their capital and hire people.
David, what's your take on what Governor Romney said last night in that clip?
Well, I find it interesting that he's saying that he wants to cut taxes for middle-class people. He doesn't want to raise taxes on the affluent, obviously, and it's hard to see how you do that and really make the math work. I think that President Obama rightly gave Romney a very hard time for the math of his tax plan just not adding up.
Any history, because we've heard from the Romney campaign that, you know, you don't want to make those cuts that he wants to make in loopholes public before he debates with Congress. Any history of that actually playing out or that actually being the way that you enter into those negotiations?
Well, it's understandable that Romney would not want to talk publicly about which loopholes he wants to close because it's not going to be popular going after those tax breaks. You know, the home mortgage interest deduction, very popular tax break in the United States. Another big one is the tax deduction for saving in your 401k. You know, no presidential candidate wants to go after those. And the truth is that that's where the money is. So if Romney does want to make up all the lost income from lowering rates, he would have to go after some of those very popular tax breaks. And so I just don't see how he makes, you know, squares that circle here.
All right, David, let's balance this out and get a clip from President Obama talking about lowering tax rates last night.
The cost of lowering rates for everybody across the board, 20%, along with what he also wants to do in terms of eliminating the estate tax, along with what he wants to do in terms of corporate changes in the tax code, it costs about $5 trillion. Governor Romney then also wants to spend $2 trillion on additional military programs, even though the military is not asking for them. That's $7 trillion. He also wants to continue the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. That's another $1 trillion. That's $8 trillion. Now, what he says is he's going to make sure that this doesn't add to the deficit, and he's going to cut middle-class taxes. But when he's asked, how are you going to do it, which deductions, which loopholes are you going to close, he can't tell you.
David, I've run out of fingers trying to do the math here. You do it for me. Was the president's math right?
Well, it's not quite fair. I mean, yes, what he's saying is correct. Romney does want $5 trillion in tax cuts through those lower rates. But Romney also proposes to make up a lot of that lost revenue by closing tax loopholes. So it's not really fair to go around saying that Romney wants to cut taxes by $5 trillion. It is fair to ask him how he's going to make up that lost revenue, what loopholes he wants to close. You know, Romney said last night, well, maybe, you know, he would have a bucket that you could deduct up to $25,000 and you could throw a bunch of different sorts of things into that bucket, whether it's your home mortgage interest or what have you. But there was an analysis recently that said that capping deductions at $25,000 would only raise $1 trillion in revenue. So Romney still has not shown how he would make that math work. And it's not fair to ask the American public to, you know, elect a guy who has a tax plan without revealing the details of that plan.
All right, David, let's get to gas prices. Here's Governor Romney last night.
The proof of whether a strategy is working or not is what the price is that you're paying at the pump. If you're paying less than you paid a year or two ago, why then the strategy is working, but you're paying more.
Now, President Obama blamed the low gas prices at the start of his administration on the recession that we were entering in. Who's right? Who's got the right notion here on gas prices, David?
Well, what most experts say is that gas prices reflect global supply and demand for oil. And that's not something that a president of either party has a lot of control over.
David Callahan with the unenviable task of doing the fact-checking. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back here on RFL. Stay with us.